help, I hope to see child welfare improve in this state and bring us to the top 10, because I know we can do it. And to quote Mother Teresa, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love.
We need each of you sharing your message, why you're involved in this fight for kids, and why it's important that they take action and make sure that policies are passed and a budget is resolved that will make a difference and provide the resources for these state agencies.
I want to talk to you for a minute about the Pinnacle Plan and what the current state of the budget means for that. We got our last co-neutral report at the end of last month. It was just released. And frankly, it was our best one so far. We received good faith efforts among a broad spectrum of our performance areas, and most importantly in the area of maltreatment and care. And all of that progress is in jeopardy. Right now, over the last 2 years, DHS has already cut $80 million from its state appropriated budget. And that includes 1,200 employees. Director Lake has done a phenomenal job of holding child welfare harmless from those budget cuts, meaning that we're continuing to put those frontline caseworkers in the field. But we're talking about this year, we talk about a 14% cut, an 18% cut. We're talking about $140 million. And that's not going to be possible. Director Lake's not going to be able to hold child welfare harmless any further.
When we talk about being confident that there's going to be a budget in the next 2 weeks, what I'm not confident of, I'm not sure I'm confident there will be one, but if there is, I am not confident it's going to address the needs of children in this state. I am not. I do not believe that based on what's happening today, excuse me, sorry, that the will is there at the legislature to do what needs to be done for the agencies that are sitting on this panel, and not all the agencies that affect kids are even on this panel, in terms of creating revenue. There are members of leadership who, as recently as budget negotiations this weekend, said, if we just cut everybody 15%, we can be done and go home. So as we talk about a budget being passed, and I know that Joe was saying this, but I want to really reiterate what he's saying. It matters whether or not it's a budget that helps kids. That really is the key question. It's not just a budget. In terms of the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, we're responsible for the prevention and treatment of mental illness and addiction in the state of Oklahoma. There are currently about 22% of people struggle with severe mental illness each year. The most common being depression, but it includes depression, it includes post-traumatic stress disorder, it includes severe anxiety disorder, it includes bipolar disorder, it includes schizophrenia. Then in addition to that, there's about 11.9 or 12% of our population that struggles with addiction each year. That includes alcohol addiction, that includes prescription drug and opioid painkiller addiction, that includes illicit and illegal drug addiction. And the fact is that when you look at those numbers, what that really means is it's between 700,000 and 950,000 Oklahomans that struggle each year. It's 1 out of every 4 of us. And when you have people struggling with untreated mental illness and addiction, you see a host of negative consequences skyrocket. You see more abuse and neglect and more calls to child welfare.
What each has articulated, I will tell you it matters very much, and it matters from a matter of lived experience, because I live what happens when we have to cut counseling services. I live what happens when adoption assistance or foster assistance is put at risk, and I live what happens when we lose providers from the network, because that remarkably affects the path for my former foster and now adopted kids. And so I will tell you what they are talking about matters. Another reason I wanted to be last is because you can all join us, or or join me and join my colleagues on a mission to Mars. And that mission to Mars is Oklahoma is going to be best served when my agency no longer needs to exist. And I am very, very candid in that assessment, because what happens is my colleagues and I and our contracting partners, for the most part, we end up being the treatment and services system when all else has failed. And what we know from understanding adverse childhood experiences and what we know from the kids that we see, it should be very common knowledge. And the further a kid penetrates into the juvenile justice system, the further that kid penetrates, the less positive outcomes that we get when we look at data across the board. So we should do everything in our collective powers to do what we can to keep kids from deep juvenile justice system involvement. There are solutions that can help significantly change my profile of the number of kids I serve. Now, are we going to make it to Mars in this context? There are going to be kids that my agency needs to serve, and I understand that we have a public safety function that is very clearly articulated. But there is nothing I find more tragic than looking at the trajectory of a kid who was removed from his or her home for justified reasons at a very young age, come into the care of DHS or wherever they go. Family's not quite prepared to deal with what is presenting them. That child lashes out at a foster caregiver, another caregiver. All of a sudden we've got assault on a caregiver, and the kid just ramps up, and the kid ramps up, and then they show up in my shop. You know what? Those are avoidable. And as a state, we have to come to grips with the fact that we can and should do better to address that.